Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining Delaware's Resilient and Sustainable Communities League, or RASCL, for our 5th annual summit. Our theme this year is Go for the Green, funding and designing resilient infrastructure, and we're all aware of the importance of that funding. We really hope that you've gotten plenty of new ideas, advice, and motivation from the summit, and that you're ready to go for that green. My name again is Nicole Marks. I'm a NOAA Coastal Management Fellow placed at the Delaware Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Control in the Division of Climate, Coastal, and Energy, which is a founding member of RASCL. I'm also a member of the RASCL Outreach and Events Committee. I'm honored to host this virtual summit and want to thank the RASCL Steering Committee and our Outreach and Events Committee for all their hard work and for hosting such an excellent list of panelists. For those of you that aren't familiar with RASCL, we're a collaborative network whose mission is to support all Delaware communities in taking the necessary actions to thrive in the face of changing environmental conditions through collaboration, information sharing, and technical assistance. RASCL has been actively working to meet its mission by establishing 4 new committees in addition to the pre-existing steering and outreach and events committees to accomplish the goals and objectives presented in the 2021 to 2025 strategic plan. These committees include the Community Assistance Committee, the Hazards and Preparedness Committee, the Science and Research Liaison Committee, and the Resilient Project Implementation Committee. It's important to note some recent endeavors by these committees. For those who are interested, the Resilient Project Implementation Committee recently launched the Project Guidance Group, which is a new service being offered to Delaware communities needing technical assistance and advice to initiate or complete resilience-related projects. The group offers advisory and technical assistance from RASCL affiliated experts. The deadline for the current round of applications is December 15th. For more information and to apply, please visit the website on the screen and in the chat box. We're also excited to announce we're currently discussing an upcoming RASCL coffee hour with DENREC's Climate Action Plan team. The date of the coffee hour has not been finalized, but details will be forthcoming. We will also be holding our RASCL members winter meeting in the winter of 2022. So stay tuned for those official announcements. Before we get into the session, I'd like to take a moment for technology and housekeeping to keep things rolling smoothly. During the session, we have moderators designated in the chat box. So when you have questions for the presenters throughout the presentations, we ask that you use the chat box and send them to our questions moderator. For help with technical issues, you can chat directly with our technical support moderator. Helping to make today's event possible are our sponsors. At the bronze level, RASCL would like to thank the Delaware chapter of the American Planning Association, the Nature Conservancy, AECOM, the University of Maryland Environmental Finance Center, and the professional architects and engineers at GMB. We couldn't hold this summit without our sponsors, so thank you so much. And we're very excited to announce that 200 people have registered for the 2021 RASCL Summit. As you can see, we've got folks joining us from all different sectors today. Specifically, we have a lot of representation from state, county, and local governments, as well as universities, the private sector, and general members of the community. This is the final session of the 2021 Summit webinar series, and it's titled Local Stories Panel. We'll have several presentations followed by question and answer sessions, and we'll conclude the webinar at 4:30 p.m. At that point, we really hope that you'll join us at our Wonder Me room for some networking. A few other things to note before I introduce our moderator. Professional PE and AICP credits are available for each of our webinars. And a reminder that today's live presentations and question and answer sessions will be recorded and made available on our website along with the presentation slides. We'll also follow up with each of you to share these resources referenced during the summit. We'll give you contact info for our speakers and attendees and send you an all-important feedback survey so you can tell us how we can improve for next year. With that, I'd like to introduce our moderator for this session. Kelly Valencic is the Delaware Byways Coordinator with the Delaware Department of Transportation and a member of the RASCL Steering Committee, the RASCL Outreach and Events Committee, and the RASCL Hazards and Preparedness Committee. Kelly, the panel is yours.
All right, thank you so much, Nicole, and thank you for the great introduction and for doing all the great facilitation that you've done so far this summit. We really appreciate all your help. And I also want to give another shout out and thank you to a person running in the background here, Jana Savini from the Partnership for the Delaware Estuary. She's behind the mask of the technical support camera right now, but she's been doing a lot of work too to ensure that everything's been going smoothly and all the details are in place for this event, as well as the technology is all running correctly. And I really appreciate you guys taking on the load of that work. So it's off my shoulders a bit and I just get to moderate. So thank you again for all that. So to start off the local story session, a little bit about me. As Nicole mentioned, my name is Kelly Valensic, and I'm a planner with the Delaware Department of Transportation, where I serve as the Delaware Byways Program Coordinator. And I also serve as one of the assistants to the Transportation Alternatives Program. And you might have heard a little bit about that program after the presentation from my boss, Mike Hahn, yesterday, where he was speaking during the grant funder session yesterday afternoon. So if you haven't heard of it before, the Delaware Byways Program is a statewide program that's collaborative, and it's in place to promote, preserve, and enhance Delaware's roadways that have at least one of the following intrinsic qualities to it. So whether it's scenic, historic, natural, cultural, recreational, or an archaeological feature, what we really want to do is protect those places, and we aim to promote them. And they're really some of the best amenities in the state of Delaware and places for folks to visit. And of course, all those places, we really promote resilient and sustainable practices so we can have these places available for generations to come to enjoy. And as Nicole said, I'm also one of the founding steering committee members of RASCL and serve on the events and outreach committee, as well as the hazard mitigation committee. So that's what brings me here to you guys today. As a part of our local story session, we have some great speakers coming up to share some projects and success stories with you that have led their communities to be more resilient and sustainable in the face of changing climate conditions. It's our hope that their work will inspire you to do some similar practices in your own communities or develop even more innovative practices in the future, which we hope that you will share with us all at some point too. So this session is going to be a little different than the other ones, in which we have some extra time to take questions at the end of each of the speakers. They're going to talk for about 20 minutes each, and then we'll have about 10 minutes for question and answer at the end of each one, so we can really engage with their presentations and discussion. So feel free to add any questions as you think of them right into the chat box so we don't forget it and don't miss them when they're done talking. Our three speakers for you today include Mike Fortner, who's the city planner for the City of Newark's Planning and Development Department, and he's going to be presenting about the City of Newark's Community Sustainability Plan. We also have Michelle Schmidt, who's the Watershed Coordinator with the Delaware Center for the Inland Bays, who will be presenting about the Anchorage Canal Drainage Retrofit Project, which is in Sussex County and in the town of South Bethany. And then we'll hear from Dr. Jules Brock, who's the professor and director of landscape architecture at the University of Delaware. And she also serves as the co-director of the University of Delaware's Gerald Mangrove Climate Science and Policy Hub. And she's the director of the Coastal Resilience Design Studio. And she'll be presenting about the studio's work in the town of Little Creek. So I'm going to slide over and introduce Mike before he gets started here. So Mike is the city planner for the City of Newark, as I said. His responsibilities include administering Newark's community development block grant programs, the city's comprehensive development plan, and special planning projects, as well as staff support for the Planning Commission and the Board of Adjustment. He's the city's liaison to the Wilmington Area Planning Council, or WILMAPCO, and their technical advisory committee, and to the Bike Newark. In addition, he serves as the executive committees. He serves on the executive committees of the Delaware chapter of the American Planning Association and the Delaware chapter of the National Association of Housing and Redevelopment Office officials. Mike earned a BA in political science from the University of Cincinnati and an MPA in state and local government from the University of Delaware. So thank you for joining us today, Mike, and I'll turn the reins over to you for your presentation.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Kelly, for your introduction. I'm here to talk about the Sustainable Newark Plan, the Sustainable Newark, our plan for sustainability. Before we get to that, let me see if that. There we go. Okay, I got to go back. I want to talk a little bit about the Comprehensive Development Plan. We completed that in 2016, and it was certified by the state in January of 2017. And it was a very long process. It took us about 2 years to complete this process, maybe even a little longer. One of the accomplishments that came out of it that I was proud of, that it was the first plan to kind of articulate a vision for land use. And so we came up with 3, we call it elements. We wanted Newark, in the way we planned in Newark, to be a healthy and active community, a sustainable community, and an inclusive community. Comprehensive plans are, of course, very broad policy documents. And there was a lot of desire, especially with the sustainability, to be more detailed on how we want to, what Newark is going to look like as a sustainable community. What do we actually really want to achieve? We had a lot of things that we wanted to be like, for example, transit and walkable and bicycle community. And we wanted to do efficient use of lands, but it wasn't specific enough. People wanted more benchmarks. What are we going to achieve, and when are we going to achieve those? And so when we adopted the comprehensive plan, we had, as a part of that, to explore these issues further, to do more planning, to come up with some sort of sustainability plan. So shortly after that, of course, in 2017, after we just adopted the plan, of course, DENREC and the Division of Energy and Climate came up with a grant opportunity for us. And it was a planning grant. And one of the things we could use planning grant funds for was to develop a community sustainability plan, as described below. And we could get up to $80,000 for a community our size. And so part of the criteria of the community sustainability plan was we had to cover at least 2 of the issues below these 8 issues. So energy reduction, renewable energy, waste reduction, all the way to flood resiliency. And so we applied for this process, competitive process. We applied for the $80,000, and we got the $8,000, and we got the $80,000 to develop through a collaborative process, a broad, long-range, and integrated community sustainability plan that identifies our goals and our vision and our implementation plan for Newark to become a more sustainable community. So the first step when we got the grant is that I worked with the CAC, the Conservation Advisory Committee, and created a plan for planning. And it was a document that describes the project. It lays out a team that we wanted. We wanted to have a steering committee that would be in charge of this thing, and with a structure that would be under the Conservation Advisory Committee, but we would find a lot of different community experts in sustainability and within our community to help us with the plan. We wanted to do a broad community outreach and have broad community participation. So we kind of laid out a plan of what we were going to do, that we were going to have public workshops, we were going to advertise in the media, we were going to go to community events and promote it, and do a wide range of bringing in all the stakeholders we could into this plan and be a very participatory process. And we also developed a timeline and also a budget. As part of the $80,000 with the DENREC grant is we had to do a match, and I think it was 20%. But they allowed us to use volunteer time, for example, and other kind of in-kind services, staff time even, that counted towards that. So when we recruited a steering committee, they actually did a lot of work. And so we got to use their time as part of the city's contribution in terms of our portion of the grant match that we did, which I believe, again, was 20%. So before we even got the committee, we it was near an event we have in Newark called Community Day. And Community Day is a project that, is an event that's on the University Green, and a lot of like nonprofits and community groups come to this event, and they just sort of promote it. And so if you're a community member, if you're going to this event, it's in September. It's usually the third Sunday of September. We didn't have them the last 2 years because of the COVID, unfortunately, but hopefully next year, if you're interested, come to this event. And as church groups, nonprofits all come there, and you can get involved with the community. And so city groups do that too. So like the city staff, and we had a planning tent for sustainability. And one of the things we did is we had these little sticker boards where we had dots, and we asked people what if we did a community sustainability plan, what things would they want us to focus on? And I'm sorry, I'm going to move my little things here. And so on the left-hand side is example of one of the posters we had, and we had like 3 or 4 of these with different little activities on. And then this was the general count. We counted the dots, and people were most interested in clean transportation and renewable energy use and sustainable development and urban design were some of your big vote getters. And, and other things were very popular too. So we got a very wide range of participation in this and ideas from this process. The next process we did was we established a steering committee. And so we wanted a broad range of, gosh darn it, local expertise. And so we what is going on? Oh, goodness gracious. Sorry about that. Very sensitive. Anytime I touch something, it moves. Okay. So we had representatives from the Conservation Advisory Commission, Newark Planning Commission was on there, representative from WMAPCO, it's our local MPO, representatives from the University of Delaware, the expertise that they had there, Bike Newark, which is a local group that focuses on bicycle planning in Newark. We have a transit organization as well, a committee that does that. That focuses on how we can improve transit. Then we have our city staff departments like Public Works, Department of Parks and Recreation, of course, our department, city manager's office. And then we had just some at-large residents too that we identified in the community that had some expertise and sustainability that could be a part of this process. And they met a lot. They met at least once a month. And then they also had some subcommittees where they get together in a coffee shop, like on the picture on the right here, and have like a little meeting to plan on some little subsections as we developed on. And one of their first tasks was to hire a consultant. And that's what we primarily use our money from DENREC for, is to hire a consultant. We hired AECOM, a competitive process. The committee took part in the interviews. It was a very unusual interview process for them, because when they come in we reviewed their applications, we scored them, then we invited them to come for an interview, and their consulting team had to come and interview with an entire committee. And then the committee made a decision. It was AECOM, and they worked out outstanding for us. A few of their staff members live locally here in Newark, and that was very helpful, and they already had a good connection. And so it was a very good working relationship. We did a series, all kinds of events. We have a total here of 600 plus volunteer hours from committee members and other community members that helped us. We did, different kind of votes. On the bottom there, we had this penny thing. So we identified local issues, and people could vote by putting pennies in each of the jars. We provided the pennies. We didn't get to make money on this. And then we had 13 plus steering committee meetings, and we had open houses where people come in, and we would have some information, education sessions, but also just have dialogues, roundtables, and again, getting people's feedback on that, which is some of the pictures that represent Community Day and just different activities that we did during that thing. But we just basically had a booth, and people would come in and talk to us, and we would talk to them, and get their ideas and get input on this plan. And so in the end, what we came up with first had 4 what they called themes. And it was the committee went very broad, but they knew they had to narrow it, but they went broad. And so the 4 themes kind of cover up the kind of categories to kind of give it some organization. And theme 1 was that we respond to climate change. And this focus was on clean energy. And so the city of Newark is a utility company, and we sell power to our residents. And so the primary goal of this was to more and more convert from non-renewable energy to renewable energy, and that transition. Theme 2 is we plan to develop for all. And this is when we think of planning and sustainability, people often associate that with like having a walkable community, having a bicycle friendly community, a community where you can have people have access to transit. So they think of the transportation angle on it. What is often overlooked, or what people don't necessarily think about, is that to have those transit, walkable community and bicycle communities, you have to get the land use is what impacts that. And so by having an excellent planning and land use, that makes bicycling and walking more feasible. So this is how we plan our community to make transportation more feasible and live in a sustainable place where you could walk. Theme 3 is build better and waste less. So this focuses on building better buildings, raising our standards so buildings are more energy efficient and more sustainable. And then the 4th, if I just a second, let me just move back, is we preserve nature and reduce impacts. And this is, again, is protecting our natural environment, our trees, our tree canopy, our green spaces, contiguous green spaces, so that we have a very relationship with nature, that we're just not overdeveloping it and not having, green space. So I'm going to go through each themes. Each theme had a series of goals, and under each goal is a series of kind of action items. I'm not going to go over each of the action items, but I would just kind of briefly cover some of the goals. But so this is for the, and I guess I skipped one already. Look at that. So theme 1 was, of course, responding to climate change. And so the main goal from this is that we're going to procure renewable generation resources in our electric mix. That's the city's utilities. We're going to reach 30% by 2025, which I believe we've already surpassed, 65% by 2035, and then 100% as soon as possible, but no later than 2045. And so the city, as a utility provider, will purchase those kinds of percentages of renewables instead of non-renewables. We're also going to try to increase people's participation on putting their own solar panels up on their houses and facilitate other kind of pilot projects. And then goal 4 is we're going to measure it. We're going to prepare a greenhouse gas emissions inventory. And we are, we're working right now, and I'm going to cover implementation just in just a little bit, but we're going to try to find benchmarks, which is 2018, and then show on a website how we're reducing that. And so people will be able to go online and kind of see real-time measurements of how we're achieving those goals. Then finally, we get to planning 3, how we plan. And the committee wanted some sort of model to look at, or how we define planning. Unfortunately, here in Delaware, we have something that's called the Complete Communities Toolbox. It was put out by the University of Delaware's Institute for Public Administration. And it lays out kind of the basic core principles of good sustainable planning on this website. And it's written in a way that's good for people that aren't planners to read. Non-planners can see this and understand it well. And some of sorry. And then, so we have this model, and so that's sort of our criteria of what makes for a plannable community. And it's really good for me as a planner because when I talk about this stuff, sometimes people, they don't believe me that like I'm making this stuff up. But when you have the University of Delaware putting this type of information out there, it's something that you can point to, and then people, it gives them a little more credibility of quite a bit more credibility of what we're trying to talk about, what our goals are. For example, having density and mixed use and how that is good for planning. Sometimes density is associated with non-sustainability. It's not a good sustainability practice, but this explains how it is a good sustainability practice to have density. We want to put out information on how to live in Newark and be car free. For example, as you know, we're a college town, and how can people get around the state and not have a car? And then finally, finding ways to reduce our greenhouse footprint through clean transportation, preparing for the electric vehicles, and in the city where, of course, we're transitioning our fleet to electric vehicles. Building better. This is, I guess, with our building betters, and we now get into implementation on this, but we're going to raise our standards on the type of buildings that we permit to be built, and how on retrofitting new buildings, and how making them more energy efficient. And then finally, reducing preserving nature, and this is everything from managing our floodplain and our water discharge, increasing our tree canopy in the city, conserving and improving our existing green spaces, and building upon our park system. That are all priorities that are laid out in the plan. Again, with action items, specific action items. So finally, I'm getting to the part where some of the implementations that we have done. Of course, the plan, as it was adopted by City Council, the Conservation Advisory Commission, which is a committee that advises council on conservation and sustainability types of measures, they kind of oversee the plan. They're sort of the executive committee for it. And then staff, we report to them, and they do a report for council. We are working with the Newark Partnership, which is a sort of kind of like our Chamber of Commerce here in Newark. It's an organization that works with not just businesses, but also nonprofits. We are working with them right now with some of our big businesses especially at the Star campus, about putting together this dashboard for us. We updated our green building code, our building code, so that we used LEED standards that raise it above beyond the normal building code standards, especially when buildings are going for a site plan approval process. They have to show that they are exceeding those demands. In our old green building code, you could achieve most of that just through normal standards. And so this raises the standards and for new buildings being constructed in the city. We're also expanding our solar park. So we have a McKee solar park, so we're expanding that. And we're also putting solar panels on city buildings such as City Hall and our field operations complex. And also at our reservoir, we have a lot of vacant land that we're putting some solar panels there. And of course, we're expanding the solar park at McKee's. And so I think there's 1,300 kilowatts of new solar generation in addition. We're expanding it by that much. We have a Green Newark initiative. We have a renewable energy program. So for you pay a fee, and 100% it purchases. I'm not very well versed on this, but it purchases, I guess, RECs for green energy. So you're essentially you're paying into a system, and your house is, well, it's 100% renewables is what you're doing, or at least you're purchasing RECs for that. And then again, as I alluded to, we're doing our city vehicle fleet is being transitioned into electric vehicles. And it covers some of the main things that we've accomplished so far in the few years since the plan has been adopted. And it has strong support with our council and the city manager, our electric department, with been very progressive in pushing forward these kind of going towards renewables. And again, it's been very embraced by the community. And so we're very proud of it, the city of Newark. And that concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to take any questions.
All right, thank you so much, Mike. That was a great overview of the program, and congratulations on getting the plan together and getting started on implementation. It sounds like you guys have been pretty busy over the last few years, so that's awesome. That's really awesome. I'm just watching the chat box to see if any questions come in. So folks, feel free to type in if you have any questions or even comments that you want to share with Mike. We can pass those on. I can get us started with a few, and I swear Mike didn't throw many softballs to pre-set up, so hopefully I won't give him any zingers here. But I just was wondering, first of all, where are you getting some of the funding for the implementation of these projects? Is it in-house? Have you guys gone for grants? Is there any that you could like tell other communities about that have been helpful? Or are there other sources of like federal funding that have been working for you guys to help get some of these projects done? So any thoughts about that would be really, really cool to hear about.
Sure. I think we have gone for some grants. Most of it, the funding has come from in-house in the city and with partnerships for, like, for example, the Newark partnership. A lot of things to see where we are funding, at least the initial stuff. So there's probably stuff in there that we will seek grants on, but I'm not aware of a specific grants that we've applied for at the time.
Okay, well, that's great. That makes things kind of easy to just use your own funding. You don't have to take the time for grants. So that's awesome. Okay, we have another question here from Mike Tholstrup, and he said, awesome job with the plan. What are your next priorities for implementation?
Sure. We are, of course, the green renewable energy thing and progressing on that, and also this, which in development right now is this greenhouse gas inventory with this dashboard. These are the higher priorities right now. The other thing we're working on here, at least here in planning, is this car-free Newark. We hope to establish some sort of guide, maybe even an online resource, but it should where we connect transit and bicycling and walking and other types of services, and how to live in Newark without a car. And I envision some sort of linkage where we link up to Delaware sites, and where we could, if you want to get to the mall, it would help you, you get this bus and you transition to this bus, and here's where you go to find out what times the buses are, and maybe some sort of information guide maybe the college students could have that help them how to get to Wilmington, how to get to the store without a car. So this car-free Newark is something we've talked about for a long time, but I think we have this staff in place to start doing this now.
That's great. And definitely talk to my office about the transportation alternatives program.
Okay.
Where we do non-motorized transportation. So I'll totally plug us there shamelessly.
Yeah.
I'm sure you guys have been working with Will Mapco on that too. So
a bike share program is something that's being talked to. The university was almost doing it, but something happened where they delayed it. And there's some more talk about it now. Having that kind of infrastructure is something we are still looking at.
That's great.
Yeah.
I have another question here from Trisha Arndt, and she says, was the Conservation Advisory Commission created specifically to drive the sustainability plan, or was it established prior to the initiative? And is it primarily citizen appointees?
It was appointed prior to this. It's been in existence for many years, maybe as many as 20 years. Certainly even predates me, and I've been with the city almost 20 years. It had been formed with some mission, and then it sort of got achieved, and it almost kind of went away for a little bit, but then it kind of came back. It was a while back, and it's been a strong committee ever since. And it just doesn't deal with this, but it deals with a whole thing of issues. They write articles for the paper. They of course they meet every month as well, and have other initiatives even outside this plan. And they are appointed by council. I believe it's each council person appoints one from their district, and then the mayor has a couple of at-large appointments.
Very interesting. Can we replicate them and put one in every community in Delaware? That sounds great. Any other questions from the group listening in? I'll give it another minute and then we'll switch over. All right, I think you're off the hook, Mike. Okay. Well, thank you so much for talking today. And if anyone has additional questions for Mike, I'm sure we can email them over to them, and we'll make all the presentations shared at the end of the summit. So you can share his presentation and ideas with other colleagues as well. So thanks again, Mike.
Thank you.
And now we're going to transfer over to Michelle Schmidt, and I'll give her a little bio here before she gets started. Michelle has held the position of Watershed Coordinator at the Delaware Center for Inland Bays since 2017. Her responsibilities are to coordinate with partner organizations on the implementation, tracking, and progress reporting for the Inland Bays Comprehensive Conservation and Management Plan, which includes the Inland Bays Pollution Control Strategy. She earned a BS in Environmental Studies and Physical Geography from Salisbury University, and she also has a Master's of Natural Resources degree from Virginia Polytechnic State University. So thank you for being here with us today, Michelle, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. All right, so I'm going to share my screen and get this going. So I'm presenting today on the center's Anchorage Canal Drainage Area Retrofit Project. And I'm gonna start this out by saying this was not my project. I am presenting this on behalf of Dr. Marianne Walsh, and this project does predate me. So when it comes time for questions, I'll do the best I can, but if there's anything I can't answer, I will certainly get up with Marianne and I can get back to you. For those of you that don't know, the Anchorage Canal is part of the Town of South Bethany Canal System on Little Assawoman Bay. And so I don't know if you can see my cursor, but I did highlight that down here for you. It's built on a 5-mile network of poorly flushed canals that drain into the Little Assawoman Bay. And it's highly impervious. It's over 50% or about 50%, which is the largest of all residential canals. And so the canal receives runoff from storm drains on nearly 1 mile of coastal highway, and it experiences high pollutant loads, making the canals highly eutrophic with frequent algal blooms, as you can see from this photo. And you know, with that, the conditions are very poor for aquatic life. So this slide shows the Anchorage Canal drainage area, which encompasses more than 120 total acres. So the green outline here is the drainage area boundary, which incorporates all of South Bethany, Middlesex, Sea Colony, and Bethany. And so all of this runoff is coming off of Coastal Highway and the surrounding communities and businesses and flows through storm drains directly into Anchorage Canal. And prior to the implementation of the retrofit plan, the only treatment for that runoff was a small sedimentation forebay that was installed by DelDOT at the head of the canal. And so this arrow here shows where that forebay is. And then this is the canal. Hopefully you can see my cursor. And so all of this area was developed before the stormwater control regulations. So this project started back in 2009. The center partnered with DelDOT, the University of Delaware, and the various communities and worked with the Center for Watershed Protection to develop a strategy to reduce pollution from the stormwater runoff. The goals of that plan were to reduce the nutrient loads by 40%, which is per the TMDLs. We wanted this to be a collaborative plan, and we of course wanted it to be cost effective. And then it was requested that we incorporate some coastal aesthetic and that we consider climate change when evaluating the projects. So it started off with DelDOT. They completed a storm drain mapping exercise. And then we utilized a desktop analysis to search for and identify the potential retrofit sites. So once we had identified those, we conducted field surveys to check out the conditions on the ground. And then for those selected projects, we came up with a concept design with about 30% design, along with cost estimates. So at the end of this planning phase, we came up with 25 retrofits, and we prioritized those by nutrient removal, cost effectiveness, and feasibility. And so the next phase, of course, would be implementation. And we did this in a phased approach. And we worked very closely with the communities to acquire grant funding, and then the center did manage the design and the construction along with our other partners. And so with this presentation, I'm going to go over those 5 phases. So the first phase was to install wet swales and infiltration pits. This started in 2011, and the goal was to treat about 30 to 40 acres of a Sea Colony high-rise condo facility parking lot and some of South Pennsylvania Avenue. And so if you drive down Coastal Highway, if you drive past Sea Colony, you can see this on the side of the highway. And so with this part, we installed 19 parking lot curb cuts and infiltration pits, which treat the water before flowing into the swales. And then we also converted the existing ditches to planted wet swales with check dams and roadside filter strips, which were then planted in native vegetation. So the picture on the top are the parking lot curb cuts, and then the bottom are the wet swales. And so this just shows you a little before and after, and I'm happy to report that it does look like this today. So it's a very successful project. It's beautiful. It looks really nice driving down the highway. And so the next phase, phases 2 and 3, is implementation of the highway bioretention areas. So this was from 2012 to about 2014. And so there were 33 highway bioretention areas that treated about 20 acres of runoff. And so to do this portion of the project, we installed or we utilized the medians and the right-of-ways on both sides of the highway. And we lowered the elevations below the existing storm drains so that more runoff, it provides more runoff storage. And then we also gained some permeability by handling those compacted soils. So we went in there and just moved things around a bit, just helped with the permeability. And then we also added biochar in 6 of those areas to increase nitrogen removal. And then that also helps with water retention. And so this is just another example here. You can see the median bioretention areas. And again, it still looks like this today if you drive down the highway. So very encouraging. And then the University of Delaware Cooperative Extension, want to give them a shout out. They did develop the native plant design alternatives for the project for this component. And so here you can see another before and after. And so some of the spaces that we were working in were very small. It was just very limiting. But we did take advantage of those small areas, even around the storm drains, as you can see here. Not a lot of area to do a whole lot with, but we still went in and planted some rain gardens, and it's still helping with that runoff. All right, moving on to stage 4. So this started in 2016, and phase 4 was all about Sandpiper Pines community. We went in and we created bioretention and infiltration retrofits throughout the neighborhood, which is highlighted on the graphic on your screen. And so this was done in 2016, and this treats a total of 10 acres of runoff. And so you can see here, these are some of the before conditions, just kind of ugly little things. And then here is after. So we did, you can see the infiltration trenches, the rain gardens around the drains, and most importantly, with all of these projects, we worked very closely with the communities. So the community helped to pick out the different rocks that fit well with their landscaping. And then here's just another picture of a catch basin. And again, we worked with the town or with the community to figure out, you know, what aesthetic works best for them. So phase 5, this was the last major implementation project from our retrofit plan. And we actually just completed this this past summer, which was very exciting. And this phase wraps up our the implementation of our plan. And This portion was funded through DelDOT's Transportation Alternatives Program, and Sea Colony also provided some match. And this project it's pretty neat. So what we did is there was a ramp right here, and we ended up removing that and turned that into a walking / biking path. There was a pedestrian safety concern, which is how we were able to utilize the TAP funding. And so we basically cut that off and then moved the turn lane down here. And then we were able to enhance the middle area right here. So this was a very technical project. DelDOT definitely ran this part of this phase. So our goals for this part was really to treat runoff from about 40 acres and reduce nitrogen and phosphorus loads. And again, there was a pedestrian safety concern, so we wanted to help with that. And we wanted to improve the aesthetics. Before it was, just bland, and now it looks really nice. So I'll show you. This is during construction, as you can see. Oh yeah, and we also did include biochar to enhance the nitrogen removal and the water holding capacity. So here's after. This is right after construction in the early summer time. You can see it's filled up nicely with water. Here is an aerial shot of it. So you can see here, this was the slip ramp. It's now a nice walkway, bikeway. And we moved the turn lane, DelDOT, excuse me, DelDOT moved the turn lane up here. And this is just another shot of it. Bay Colony is on the right side or left side, depending on where you're looking. And so that wrapped up the 5th phase of the project. We actually ended up doing an additional project that wasn't in the original plan. But it actually was a really neat project. And so this was in 2015. We got a community water quality improvement grant to conduct a pilot study to evaluate the feasibility of using floating wetlands to improve water quality in the canals. So you can see this right here, they're the floating wetlands. And so with the grant, we were able to install 150 floating wetland mats in various locations throughout the canals, and those were planted with Spartina marsh grasses. And so those mats are actually still being maintained by the town. Some of the benefits are, of course, they beautify the canals. They do provide some water quality treatment, and they also provide a lot of complex habitat, which was somewhat of a surprise to the center in terms of what sort of organisms were utilizing the wetlands, floating wetlands, but it was pretty neat to see that it was really great for fish and other invertebrates. So overall, altogether, the projects achieved about 2/3 of the nutrient reduction goal for nitrogen, but more than doubled the reduction goal for phosphorus. So we think it was really successful. Part of the reason why the nitrogen reductions was only about, half of what we wanted it to be was because really in urbanized areas, reducing nitrogen is just extremely challenging. But because of the different types of BMPs that we utilized, reducing phosphorus was just a lot easier compared to the nitrogen. Nitrogen just tends to be more mobile. So this is just our conclusion slide. All in all, the total cost was about $1.5 million, and there was funding from various sources. So DelDOT was a major partner in this. The center got, I think, a couple of community water quality improvement grants. Sea Colony was an amazing help with funding, and some other communities as well. And so the retrofit plan was constructed project by project in a completely voluntary, non-regulatory fashion. Just great partnerships all around. So we really use it as a model for other communities. And it demonstrates, most importantly, what can be done with dedicated funding. Obviously, this took us several years to finish, and most of that was due to, you know, having to raise funding and get the grants and wait for different funding cycles. So it's a really good example of what can be done with dedicated funding. And that's it. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you so much, Michelle. It was a great presentation and tons of work that you guys all did. And I was lucky enough to be able to go on a driving tour of some of these sites over last spring to see them in person. And it really is some beautiful work. You know, you've created gardens out of asphalt. So that's just awesome. And congratulations on all that you guys have done there. We do have a question that came in, but folks, feel free to put them in the chat box as they come up to your mind. So I'm going to toss this one over to Michelle while you're typing away. So I think this one kind of maybe was answered, but if you want to just go back to it and elaborate on it a little bit, there's a question from Mike Hahn. And he asks, is there a performance measure to determine the level of water quality improvement goal to achieve? Or someone monitoring water quality, and do you have the results? So I think you showed a quick slide on that, but yeah, if you can elaborate on any monitoring that you're doing, and are you kind of at where you want to be with water quality, or is there still more to do in the area that you would like to do?
Yeah, so in terms of trying to evaluate how successful these projects are at reducing nitrogen and phosphorus pollution, how we really decide that or figure that out is using different models. There's different research that has shown, you know, that these practices will result in X number of, or X pounds of nitrogen, X pounds of phosphorus if implemented. And so the center doesn't always do, you know, any water quality monitoring sort of before and after these projects, but we do use the standard nutrient reductions for these various practices. We are involved in water quality monitoring. We have some long-term water quality monitoring results, and we also have some continuous water quality monitoring sensors out in the bays right now. So it's something that we're tracking, and actually we are working on our updated State of the Bays report, the 2021 State of the Bays report. We do one every 5 years. And so this report is now looking at all of our water quality data and trying to assess how we're doing. So I don't want to spill the beans before we're ready, but that will come out hopefully early next year, maybe spring next year, and that will really tell us how we're doing.
Great, thanks. Another question here is from Ryan Mawini, and he said, what is involved in the desktop analysis to identify potential problem areas, i.e. how did you decide which areas to inspect in the field?
Great question. I was not around for this, so I don't know the particulars of what went into the study. I can follow up with Marianne and definitely get back to you. Usually what we do is we decide on various factors that we want to examine, whether that's amount of impervious area, you know, we probably use the storm drain analysis, things like that, that we will then rank to run a tool. But I can definitely get more information from Marianne on that. I think that was when she was working at DelDOT, so we might have to do some digging to find out the specifics.
No problem. Thanks, Michelle. Another question here is from Danielle Swallow, and she asked, is the Center for Inland Bays planning to carry out similar projects in other areas of the Inland Bay area? And if so, where? And do you have funding in hand to do this?
Great question. We did a similar master planning exercise with Dewey Beach. So Dewey Beach has a stormwater master plan that we have also been working with a town to implement. We are finding that stormwater projects are a little less cost effective compared to some other best management practices, such as reforestation. So it's still something that we're focusing on, but we haven't identified other areas to do more planning. Right now, we're really focused on getting Dewey's plan implemented, and we don't have funding in hand. The projects can be very expensive for the nutrient. They're just not as cost effective, so they're not as attractive when it comes to funding. So it's definitely a challenge that we're trying to address.
Sure, yeah, you gotta keep looking at the big picture of everything that you can do to have an impact, so makes sense. Another question from Mike Tholstrup is, what climate change impacts were considered and how did it impact the final designs?
Great question. I'll probably have to get back to you on that. I know that when considering climate change factors, of course, we wanted to take into account sea level rise, given the location of Bethany, South Bethany, and all the communities, and then also an increase in rainfall, just because of how impervious the town of South Bethany is, and given an increase in rainfall will cause more surface water runoff. So those two were definitely considered. I can get a little bit more information on how that whole first part of the study went, though.
Awesome, thanks. And we'll give another minute for some more questions to come in if you think of them. I'll ask a question while we're waiting. So you mentioned that you did some outreach in the community where you did some retrofits. Did you have to do additional public outreach in the other locations, and what did that look like? For example, down at the TAP site, near Sea Colony, did you have to work with the landowner there? And what about the floating wetlands? Did you have to work with some of the community members there? And how did that go? Were they concerned about, the new aesthetics or new maintenance that they would have to do, or do you guys take care of that or something? So
yeah, so community outreach was a big part of this, and luckily, the town of South Bethany is great and has always been great. They have a really active environmental committee that we worked very closely with throughout the entire project, spanning several years. Sea Colony, we also had to do a lot of communication with them. The two folks that we worked with directly were great, though. But yes, it's always a concern, from the perspective of the landowners. And so with the floating wetlands, we had to work with where, I guess whoever had their property right on the canal where we were going to put the floating wetlands, we had to get their permission, and not everybody wanted a floating wetland in front of their house or in their canal. So boaters and things like that you have to take into consideration. But luckily there was a lot of community support for all of these projects. The floating wetland project, we got a lot of volunteers to install those, and there's still a lot of interest in maintaining those. So we were very fortunate that the communities were just very, very easy to work with, and very interested and invested in the environmental improvements as well.
That's awesome. And I'm sure that kind of goes to show your other education and outreach work that Center for Inland Bays does. I think a lot of the community members value the clean water that they have in the area, and they know why it's so important. So that's very cool that it all comes together there when you want to implement the project. So thank you.
Very helpful.
Yeah. Oh, dogs in the background barking. So sorry. COVID virtual issues breaking through. Oh no. So I don't have any more questions for you, Michelle. So we'll let you off the hook, but thanks again for a great presentation and for sharing the example of the TAP project, the Transportation Alternative Project from Delta. We really appreciate getting the word out about that. And if anybody has other questions about that, in particular to bring one of those programs to your community, let me know, or Mike Hahn know that spoke the other day too. So, but thank you again, Michelle. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce Jules now, and she'll be our third and final speaker for the session. Dr. Jules Brock is a professor and director of landscape architecture at the University of Delaware. She also serves as the co-director of the University of Delaware's Gerald Mangon Climate Science and Policy Hub, and she's the director of the Coastal Resilience Design Studio. Dr. Brock's research interests relate to coastal resilience, green infrastructure, community engagement through citizen science, and public perception of sustainable landscape practices, such as designing for ecosystem services. And this afternoon, she'll be giving a presentation on her work with the Coastal Resilience Design Studio in the town of Little Creek. So take it away, Jules, and we'll have questions for you at the end of your presentation.
Kelly, thank you so much. I'm really appreciative of this opportunity and have been really enjoying the presentations from the other two speakers. I'm aware of some of their work, and it was really great to hear some of that follow-up. So I'm going to be talking today about work that was completed by the Coastal Resilience Design Studio in Little Creek, Delaware. And our work with Little Creek is ongoing, but I thought I would take this opportunity, which I'm thankful to have, so thanks for inviting me, Kelly, to introduce CRDS for those of you who are not familiar with that program. and to introduce you to the nature of the problem that Little Creek was having, and how we use nature-based infrastructure to address flooding and enhance resilience. I wanted to talk a little bit about our project funding strategy, which is ongoing, and then share some lessons learned. So before I start, I wanted to get, I just have an opportunity. I think I might have missed a slide. Excuse me for 1 second. Yes, for some reason it skipped right over this slide. I wanted to get an opportunity just to describe to you what the Coastal Resilience Design Studio is. This is a project that is funded by Delaware Sea Grant, and it is faculty who work with interdisciplinary teams of student designers, researchers, and engineers. We pull these students together through funded internships to explore different challenges that are facing Delaware's coastal communities. And we really are working to provide something that a community can use as a catalyst for moving forward with resilient planning and adaptation strategies that will help them mitigate disruptions. It's really a starting point. We deliver conceptual design work that needs further interpretation and engineering, and that's the process I'm going to walk you through today. Some of you on the call are part of our technical advisory review panel. We're working with primarily undergraduate students to produce the work, and so we have regular meetings with professionals from our community and agencies to help us to make sure our students' design solutions are feasible. And one of our goals, of course, is to develop professional students who can go into Delaware communities in the future to address some of these problems, perhaps through work at different agencies that they get exposure to through the studio and or private practice of their own. So that's a little bit about the Coastal Studio, and now just a little bit about the project in Little Creek. So Little Creek, Delaware is located in Kent County near Dover and the Dover Air Force Base. It is a very small community, and they engaged us to help them with primarily flooding issues. But just like we've noticed in other towns that we've worked with, the Coastal Studio, which provides free design services, I should mention, to communities, there's often other problems that they want us to address. And once we started working with the town, we heard that there was issues related to traffic and speeding through the town, which we engaged in and tried to help them with some of their issues in that regard. And also that their commercial district was in need of some design. So we worked to help with the economic development of the town too. So the place branding was about sense of place. Stormwater strategy was a big part of what we were there for, but we also engaged in work to help with their traffic and commercial endeavors. So as far as the branding, I just want to share a couple slides with you related to the scope of the project, which was really large. Our final report is probably 100 pages or so, and you can find that on the CRDS website. And I can share the link with you after the presentation. But part of what we'd like to do is include a branding component, a marketing and branding component, especially if we're going to be talking about economic opportunities for small towns. And we've done this in various places. You might have seen some of the branding that Ben Muldrow from Arnett Muldrow has helped in towns like Leipzig and Laurel, Delaware. The reason we like to do this is because we can start a large design project that's going to take many years, perhaps decades, to install with a very quick project that can easily be installed. And perhaps you have a sense of place for the town and a sense of that there is something happening. So like little things are happening around here, and that might give a bit of community pride and energy around the overall project. So this was part of the branding. Again, I've told you about people speeding through Little Creek. So one of the things that we did for their branding was come up with a statement, slow down, live a little. And of course, the Little Creek logo has a throw to the water because this is a water town. And with that branding process, we developed designs with the help of Ben Muldrow, who is our creative director for CRDS. These are street banners, and the town implemented this idea right away. They raised money as a town to purchase the banners and install the banners. And it was also part of a traffic calming exercise where we were thinking maybe if there were these banners, these attractive banners as you come through town, it might give a visual cue to people to slow down a little bit. And I believe I have a slide right here that would show what that might look like. So you can see why people might speed through this town. It's a long straight road, and you know, it's not uncommon for a speed limit change to happen and people to not slow down as much as they should. So if you look at this slide and then the follow-up slide that the students shared with the community, with the addition of the banners and changing the color of the parking lane and putting a crosswalk in, our concept was that it would change the relative scale of the road and make it appear to be smaller and appear to have some energy around it that might just automatically slow people down. So I'll just do the before and after again. So this would be what it looks like, and this would be what it could look like. And just so you know, the banners are installed. We've discussed the idea of coloring the parking lane, and it hasn't happened yet, but I do think it's a great idea. And there is discussions as well about crosswalks. So things are happening related to this traffic calming idea. We also had this idea that we could squeeze traffic down by having them move around a planted barrier. And we actually had an opportunity to test this design idea through another one of my research projects called Living Lab in collaboration with DelDOT. And we placed this treatment, a mock-up of this treatment in the actual space. And statistically speaking, it did slow people down. But related to one of the lessons learned, it didn't make everybody happy. The design idea didn't make everybody happy. And I'll talk more about that when we get to the lessons learned. But it was a really valuable exercise for the designers to understand that you have to bring everybody into the communication if you're going to try to do something different in a town. And again, I'll talk more about that at the end of the presentation. And another thing that we did was we worked with one of the commercial developers to develop an idea for micro retail. And the idea here was that there's a need in Little Creek for different services and a desire for people to have an opportunity to be entrepreneurial, to sell some stuff related to the water. So maybe an outfitter or a bait and tackle shop. And also for the community in general to have access to fresh produce, perhaps an ice cream cone, a little store. And a small footprint store is a very affordable rent potentially for people. So we decided that we would work on this concept of micro retail. And the developer who owns the Little Creek Grill and recently opened that grill was really excited about this concept and the idea that people could come into this little waterman's village and pick up an ice cream cone with their kids, get some produce, maybe this time of year, get some Christmas trees or greens, get a sandwich at the deli, and then maybe stop and get some additional things in these little small footprint retail spaces. We were pretty excited about this idea, and so was the developer. And my understanding is that the developer is in the process of creating these buildings and putting them on the lot and getting ready to install this. So we're hoping that that actually happens and that these shops come to Little Creek. So stay tuned for that. But I primarily wanted to talk about stormwater strategies. I just thought I'd share some of the other highlights of the overall design before I got into the stormwater information. But Little Creek, the reason the Coastal Studio was engaged in the first place is because Little Creek has a lot of flooding. So as soon as it starts to rain in most typical rainstorms, they'll experience water flowing over the land, as you can see here, and not infiltrating and flooding the different properties and getting very close to the houses and businesses, so threatening the houses and businesses in the town. So here's an example of some of the rainstorms that either my students or I encountered when we were visiting Little Creek, or that were shared with us by community members who are primarily concerned about flooding. And you can see how the water crosses the street, and I'll talk a little bit about how the water should be moving and how it was getting backed up and is getting backed up, and some of our design solutions for this. So very large puddles in not very large rainstorms. So it doesn't take much to create this kind of flooding. And you can see the large amount of ponding and pooling on the grass here near the post office and the civic buildings, and the flow of the water, which is coming from this side of the road across the street, trying to get into additional ditches and swales when things are just not functioning properly right now. And this would be the ultimate place where the water is trying to go. And as you can see, there's not a lot of capacity in here. And there's a lot of Phragmites and invasive plants. And this wetland has a lot of, well, we have to address the wetland and work to make that perhaps a healthier wetland over time. So the students worked to understand the problem, talked to community members, witnessed storm events, you know, the type of thing where we know it's going to rain, so we run down to Little Creek and we get pictures. They followed the storm drains and the different outfalls and tried to understand the areas of most flooding. So here is the area where I was just showing you where the park was. Down here and further south where the bridge is, there's also a great amount of flooding around the commercial zone in Little Creek. So the students mapped out all the different storm drains and tried to understand the water flow, the ground recharge, and just the overall hydrology. And that included the depth to the water table, which they discovered was very low all through Little Creek, so very shallow depth to water, and also very high variation in water through most of town. So they did some of that type of analysis and wrote out some stormwater objectives. They really wanted to provide an opportunity for Little Creek to manage stormwater independently, address storm flooding events with green infrastructure treatments that convey water slowly and infiltrate, convey water slowly where infiltration is not possible, because they were trying to understand the infiltration potential, and also increase the resident time of water in areas where water was safe, where it could safely and effectively infiltrate. So those were the primary stormwater objectives, and they focused on 3 different areas. The first one is the agriculture and the agricultural buffer and swales. So the first area where I showed you this bad flooding that's coming near this property, they mapped it and they mapped where this was coming from. And there is a ditch that runs through here, but obviously it's not wide enough, and there's a lot of runoff coming from an adjacent farm field. There's some damage to the ditches, or they need to be like cleared. And one of the things that is interesting, and I think I have a better picture of this, is that even during a sunny day, there's a lot of water in the ditch that flows between this property, like right through here. But it's, you know, so it never really dries up. So it's a lot of water coming off of fields that. So just trying to understand how the water flows and what's possible. Yes, here's the blown up version of the agricultural field, the buffer that exists. That's the ditch that has water flowing through it. I just got to notice that my internet connection is unstable, so I hope you can hear me. Maybe please alert me, Kelly, if there's any trouble with my internet, and I'm happy to maybe turn off my video, so that would reserve some bandwidth.
You're still good. You're coming through good. So
Great.
keep
Okay.
going.
So they wanted to understand how an agricultural buffer program might work, and they were trying to design a project that could increase a riparian buffer to surround the wetlands, to just increase the whole overall wetland buffer area, and create potential incentives for farmers to via the CREP program to engage in increasing those wetland buffers. That was on private property though. So one of the things that we had a struggle with in Little Creek was that there's not a lot of municipal land. The municipal land is across the street, but we're working on different small parcels and large parcels of private property. So bringing people together to help solve this problem when different people are have land use that differs from perhaps the ultimate goal, was something that we really needed to work on. And it was a huge challenge, especially because we did this project in the summer of 2020, right after COVID started. So we were we were at a disadvantage in terms of community meetings. But they also wanted to create a bioswale that meandered to allow for some of that slower infiltration and dissipate some of the energy. And they wanted to, of course, try to improve water quality and water quantity. So this is the property right in through here that was challenged with all of that flooding. And again, this is on the agricultural lands, but the idea was to extend the existing buffer to make it a larger buffer and enhance it, and that would protect the existing wetland and perhaps cause a little bit less water to need to flow down through that swale, and then designed an inlet with this sort of meandering check dam, which is very creative. And when we presented this to some civil engineers, it was interesting because they were like, this is why you invite a landscape architect to do design work, especially in your side yard, because you have a little more design flair than the engineer who's just primarily interested in conveying water. So we were pretty proud of the solution because it had a little bit of interest in terms of design. So I'll tell you a little bit more about what's happening with all of these different treatments after I go through them. But the other opportunity area that we found that would be really helpful to help us with water infiltration was in the addition of a new green infrastructure piece was in the constructed or in the wetland area across the street. So this is the municipal building, which is like the front building to a beautiful park, and they just put a dog park in. Again, it has a lot of flooding and ponding, but there's a lot of potential here to do a lot because it is a big space. It's a big open space and it already has a wetland. It's just not functioning all that well. Let me pass that slide. So here again is the vision of the post office, the very large dog park, and some of that wetland area that you can see in here. And all the flooding that occurs is within these areas up and through here. So we also had an opportunity to look at the different outlets and inlets from the storm pipes and try to understand how that influences the water flow. And that factored into their design solution as well. And what they wanted to do for the park was to form a constructed wetland that would also have a native plant pollinator garden with an underdrain that would lead the water to a forebay. They would create bioswales and bump outs along Main Street and the Port Mahon Road with curb cuts to try to slow water down and lead it to the forebay, and replace some of the parking lot with pervious pavement, and then update the park amenities that would also include some of the things that were in the comprehensive plan, like a multi-use trail, more bench seating, communities. So they were trying to make it a really nice community area. And so this was part of the plan that would, again, put a lot more green around the storm inlets and native plant garden near the post office, all conveying water to a forebay that would slow water down and take it into a deeper pool. And you can see this would be a trailhead. The bioswale would lead to a trailhead, and then a walking path that would go through this marshy area and around the back and extend down to the creek through the back of the properties. And this required them to really think about also the wetland area and the plant communities that would be that they would need to revise from, low marsh, high marsh, and different plant communities that would help with the water conveyance. So this was some precedent images of what they envisioned the park could end up functioning as, a place to socialize, a place with educational signages that could explain the native plant gardens and the pollinator habitat. So that was the second part of the project. And then the third part of the project was the overall constructed wetland, which again is to the side of the dog park, and it led behind the town through a ditch. And the ditch had some elevation issues that was causing it not to drain and to perhaps drain in the wrong direction. So they had studied that quite extensively. They walked all along this wetland area and through the ditches one day and really tried to understand what the problems were and where the hitches were, so that they could share in the plan what could possibly be done. But I wanted to pause on this for a second so you can see that the houses are here and the primary road is off to the corner, the upper right of this slide. And one of the things that we thought would be very helpful is a program, and I have a brochure, the heading of like a brochure that you can see, that could help us construct bioberms in these backyards. So pulling out the Phragmites and considering like bioberms in the backyard. The mayor of the town, Glenn Garvey, actually did create a berm in his backyard, and it really made a difference in terms of how closely the water from this area encroaches toward the back of the house during a high tide flood event. And so we really thought that it would be a good idea. And maybe another one of those small wins, similar to the street banners, that we could get people to install bioberms pretty inexpensively compared to redoing an entire constructed wetland or storm systems. So we wanted to remove the Phragmites, deal with the invasive plants, dredge the wetland, and create different forebays and deep pools, as I mentioned before, and then remove the culvert to allow for natural flow and replace the culvert with a larger one at a particular pinch point that they discovered. And then they just had some sketches to describe this. So these sketches were very preliminary, but helped to convey their ideas to the community. And these were some precedent images of what it might look like if they did get a grant to install walking trails, and how nice that would be for the town to be able to move around and sit and relax and enjoy the beautiful scenery in Little Creek. Here's the backyard bioberm. This was just a example of a design guideline mock-up that we thought would be really interesting if we could develop a community and homeowner education program. As I mentioned, the mayor created his own backyard berm, and so we thought if we could put advice together for community members, or if we could find small grants to help community members create those backyard bioberms, it would help the flooding that's threatening those structures. So the funding, so the CRDS projects, we work to create these plans so that they're catalysts for getting the towns to the next step and the next stage. So the conceptual designs were presented to the community, and afterwards, and once the community accepted the plans for the green infrastructure project, we went to Denmark, to Jim Sullivan, and he had an open call for surface water matching planning grant. And we partnered with Duffield Engineering to suggest that we do a feasibility study for all of this green infrastructure. And I spoke with Duffield yesterday. They are just about to deliver the plan to the town, their feasibility study. So I'm really excited that we were able to get that grant. And our next steps for this are to complete the feasibility study with Duffield and then search for funding to go through design, permitting, and construction documentation phase. And then again, search for implementation funding. And really, when I spoke with Duffield, they thought that the primarily, like the most obvious solution, and this was one of the lessons that I learned, the most obvious solutions are the right solutions. And Duffield is going to encourage the town to really clean up the wetlands, dredge and remove the invasive species, and fix the siltation of the channel. And it's really what the students had recommended in that stage 3 of that plan. So I was really excited to hear that that was going to perhaps by expanding its storage, be a big part of the solution. I think it's a great first step for the town. So one of our lessons was perhaps the obvious solution is the right solution. And I had fun talking to folks at Duffield yesterday about that. We also want to address the road drainage infrastructure. Our friends at DelDOT have been in conversations with us the whole way through, and they understand the drainage infrastructure under the roads is old, and that's a bigger conversation and perhaps something we can, moving forward, it'd be great to address that drainage infrastructure. But additional lessons learned, one of the main things that we learned is that we need to bring all the stakeholders to the table. We did struggle because of COVID to get community engagement, but there was also all of these adjacent property holders. So we tried to find out their names and contact information and invite them to things that we were doing, but we didn't get everybody. And when that happens, then there is resistance from people who matter and have influence. And so I think as a group, we've learned that it's really important to have everybody at the table, because if they're not at the table, they will show up at community presentations or at your pop-up event and then tell you how they feel about your project. So we really want to make sure we do a better job with that in the future. We also love this idea of designing small projects like the backyard bioberms and the flags and things like that, because it gives people the sense that things are happening. Writing these grants takes time, and the projects take time. So they know that the plan is in place and that there's something moving toward a solution. But in the meantime, like these small projects that don't require a ton of funding might be a good thing to just make sure that the community members understand that things are actually happening. And then places with limited capacity really do require technical assistance. I help with the planning, as you see, this kind of work that we deliver from our students, and also then the grant writing as well. And I think that my goal is to then turn projects over to professionals in the state, licensed landscape architects and civil engineers who can actually do the work. But there needs to be a catalyst. There needs to be something in place that the town buys into and that can help funders see that there's a vision for the town. And that's why I'm really I'm just so happy that Delaware Sea Grant supports this project, CRDS, and allows us to work to build student capacity and work with our agency friends and town members to put these plans in place. And I'm hoping that we can make a difference in many towns in Delaware. And I really have had a great time working in Little Creek. And it's just one of many projects I hope to present to you over the years through CRDS. Thanks so much, Kelly.
Thank you, Jules. That was a great presentation. I think you covered a lot there about all the work that you guys have been doing, you know, not only you, but all the students pitching in as well. So it's a great way for them to learn, you know, hands-on, on the ground techniques. So that's just awesome. It's a feel-good project, and Little Creek is such a well-deserving town of all this work. So I'm really happy to see all these results coming out for them. I think they're really excited about it too. So thank you very much. I'm going to let some questions come in. We have a few more minutes for some questions. First one is from Danielle Swallow, and she said, in your estimate, how much did CRDS's conceptual design work save Little Creek in initial design costs?
Yeah, that's a great question, Danielle. And we're trying to quantify this in terms of how many student hours and what this would cost if it went to a normal, like a regular professional design studio. And we keep coming out with numbers for these projects that are around $30,000 to $35,000 worth of design work. It's a lot of students. It's an army of students working on these projects, and they're working 35, 40 hours a week. And of course they're learning, but I know from also being a professional landscape architect in the state, I know what these projects cost. And it really has worked out to be about $30,000 to $35,000 worth of savings for the town of Little Creek by CRDS doing this work. And they don't have $35,000 to put into a landscape project or plan. And so I'm hoping that the $50,000 grant that we received from DENREC, the first grant, is just one of many that starts to build where, this investment from Delaware Sea Grant and the energy from CRDS and the university is putting into building a lot of investment into Little Creek, so that this really does pay off in spades.
Yeah, it just seems like this is just the start to get the momentum going, and then it'll keep on rolling along. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I might mention that the idea for this came from our work in Laurel, Delaware, which Delaware Sea Grant was a big part of that too. And a plan that we did called the Ramble really drove millions of dollars of investment into Laurel over time. And there's a lot more to go. So, I mean, these projects take time and are expensive. And so hopefully the plan is what gets the driver behind making it all happen. I'm
going to skip Shweta's question. She asked if you've done any work with other communities. So you just mentioned Laurel right there.
Yeah, I mentioned Laurel, and I mean, we're working with Claymont, Delaware right now, and we've worked with Frederica, and we've done some work in Lewis. So yeah, Pickering Beach, we're working with Fenwick Island State Parks we've worked with. Sometimes we work with smaller agencies as well. So yeah, we've done a lot of different projects in the state.
I have another comment from Mike Tholstrup to keep his program in mind for grant funding. So be sure to be in touch with him over at the Outdoor Recreation Parks and Trails Grants Program. And then I have a question from Steve Benigi, and he asked, what were the lessons learned with your traffic calming initiatives?
Yeah, that was a really interesting situation. We actually we collected data before and after our traffic calming pop-up was in place. And we know that statistically speaking, the pop-up did slow down traffic. So it was a success in that regard. However, we also found out that the agricultural community that's adjacent to Little Creek was not in favor of the solution. And it's pretty obvious why. They have large equipment that they drive through that town. And when we put something right in the middle of the road, it really was not easy for them to maneuver around it. So that was one of our lessons learned. And I think what we're going to end up doing is working to use more crosswalks to try to slow traffic down. But the planting the thing in the middle, it really needed all those voices at the table, all the stakeholders. The agricultural community was missing in the planning piece, so they didn't have a way to voice that would be problematic for their large equipment that they want to drive through the town. So lessons learned, it's a big one. The design solution worked, but it didn't work. It has to work for the people.
Yeah, that's all right. Lesson learned. And now, everybody here knows to watch out for that issue too. So we appreciate you learning that lesson on our behalf. Another question here I have from Ryan Mawini was the town did some work earlier on their comprehensive plan about sea level rise. Were you able to take that into account with some of the plans that you did, or did you all start fresh when you started this project?
That's a great question. And no, we are very reliant on plans that have been done in the past in some of these communities, particularly when we're having a hard time having community stakeholder engagement meetings because of pandemics. So we scoured that comprehensive plan that was relatively recent. And also the Working Waterfront Initiative had done some work in the town as well. So we used all of that work as a starting point. And also, those plans tend to survey the residents. And rather than resurvey the residents and asking them the exact same thing, what would you like to see in your community? We start with the plans and we try to find out what they want so they don't end up having to answer the same survey 3 times. So we were very happy to have updated plans for Little Creek, and we relied on them for the starting point of our project for sure.
Awesome. There's a note from Ed Lewandowski here. I think he wants you to share your exciting results from the SURF National Design Competition.
Ed, I didn't know you were on the call. Thank you for that. We do have very exciting news. The Coastal Resilience Design Studio competed in a national competition that looked at resilience in the city of Hampton, Virginia. It was a contest with other universities, and we came in first place. So we are an award-winning Coastal Resilience Design Studio. And it was a big award, and it was an amazing project. It was called Carbon in the Tidewater. And that is also up on our website, which I'll have to share with you, Kelly. It's a strange way around to find our website. So I'll make sure that you get the email address for that. But it's a beautiful project, and I hope you all will take a look at it. And we beat Penn State and Virginia Tech, but Penn State is my alma mater, so I was very pleased to be to come out on top there.
Makes it all the more sweeter, huh? Well, yeah, cherish that link, and we can spread the word on our RASCL website too. I just have one more comment from Mike Thulstrup, and then we'll wrap up. He said, did you consider street lighting upgrades and moving to LEDs in like decorative fixtures that could have multiple benefits?
Wow, Mike, that is such a great question. And I am actually embarrassed to say, no, we didn't, but obviously that is a great idea. And it is something we should be taking into account for all of these towns. And maybe that's something that I will email you about so I can learn more about some ideas for that. But I think that that's the direction we should definitely go in with all of our plans. Thanks for that.
Yeah, and maybe
with the climate
Mike, you can fund that grant to do that. That'd be great,
yeah.
Mike.
Yeah, no, that's a great suggestion and a great thought. And I'm embarrassed to say we didn't think of it for this project, but we really should have, and we should for all of our small towns.
Well, you certainly thought of a lot of other things, so you are excused on that note. Well, thank you again, Jules. And if folks have other questions, you can put them in the chat box, and we can send them on to Jules to follow up with later. But if you want to stop sharing your screen, Jules, and I'll move on to kind of wrap up our summit for the year. Let me see if I can share my screen now. I gotta become a presenter. Figure out how to do this like everyone else did. So just to wrap us up, thank you all so much for attending these past sessions yesterday and today. Just to give you a preview of what's up next for RASCL in the new year, 2022. Want to make sure to direct you all to our website. We have a lot of updates on there. It's www.derascl.org. So you can put that right into your browser and bookmark it. We have resources available from lots of reports that our partners have done, as well as more information from our committees and the work that they are doing, a lot of notes and presentations from some of our members' meetings and things like that. We'll also have recordings and the slides from our summit, so you can reference those in the future or share them with colleagues if they weren't able to attend. Another action that you can take is sign up for the RASCL e-newsletter, which provides programmatic updates from our partners and members. And then we also alert you when we're having events scheduled. And there's a couple to tune in for or tune in about in the upcoming new year. We're going to definitely have a coffee hour, which are ways to connect RASCL members with local communities and stakeholders in an informal setting. We've done some of these virtually, but we're really hoping to get back to an in-person format and maybe do some of these in a hybrid way. It's a way for local officials and community members to be in person with our partner members and ask them questions and network. An example of one of the coffee hours that we did back in September was on FEMA's Risk Rating 2.0, and we had Richard Sobata from FEMA Region 3 come and talk about that, as well as Dave Warga from DENREC. speak about things that they're working on. And then one of the ideas for our next one is to talk about the climate action plan for the state of Delaware. So we'll hopefully announce something coming up soon for our coffee hour. We also have a winter members meeting. This is for all the partner organizations and their representatives to get back together and talk about how we can advance RASCL. And we strongly encourage you all to participate in this. It's help us, your opinions and ideas help us get better and grow over time so we can really support the communities throughout the state as they adapt to the impacts of climate change and sea level rise. And then finally, be in touch with us if you have a project idea as a community member or a nonprofit organization that wants to float an idea to the RASCL group. We do have a whole committee working on this. And what we're asking you to do is to submit some project ideas through our website. The link is at the bottom of the slide here. And it's a really short application. It's just to get some counseling in front of some of our members about advice that you might want to have in hand as you put a project together. And this could help you go for grants and things like that. So be in touch with us. We do have a deadline of September 15th, but I'm sure we'll have another round coming up in the future too. And then next up, see if I can switch my slide here. Oops, sorry. Next up, we're asking you to now take some action and grab your favorite beverage and snack and join us over in the RASCL Summit Lounge. We are going to have in our chat box a link to get over there. We do have to get out of the Zoom platform. We don't have it working in this one, so you're going to have to end your Zoom show in just a second and jump on over. If you don't see that link, you can always go back to your email that came from Jana or Eventbrite, and it has the link to join in there as well. I think it asks you for the option to upload your headshot and to identify yourself, but then you can log on and connect and we can continue some of the great conversations and discuss the ideas that you've heard throughout the summit today and yesterday. But thank you all so much for taking the time to join us out of your busy schedules. We're really glad that we can still get together virtually during these crazy COVID times. And I just want to wish you a wonderful evening and wonderful holidays and Happy New Year. And hopefully we can get back together again very soon. So thanks again. And I'll see you over in the Summit Lounge. All right. Talk to you guys soon. Bye.